Hey everyone, welcome to my channel and welcome back to my subscribers. This is Bald Guy Money. I am Bald Guy, and today we are talking Rolex watches. Is a Rolex a good investment? Is a watch in general a good investment? Now this video might surprise you, so be sure to watch to the very end, because not only am I going to dispel a lot of myths about the Rolex watch and watches in general, but I am also going to explain how an Apple Watch can actually be more expensive than a Rolex watch. So I am here at my table today and I have a few of my watches with me, and let me start by saying that watches are actually becoming very popular alternative investments for people right now. And if you've heard stories of people buying watches like this for $5,600 from Rolex dealers and then selling them for in excess of $30,000, well then the idea of buying a watch as an investment might have crossed your mind at some point in time. Now, as most of you know, this channel was founded with the idea of educating people on turning their hard-earned money into wealth-building assets, and I used to say it at the beginning of a lot of my early videos. And as attractive as making money on watches may seem, there is a lot you need to know about alternative assets before diving in. So let's get into this and start with first explaining the term alternative asset, because this is something very real that has gained a lot of traction with investors over the last decade, and they include, so number one you can see on the list is watches, the topic of today's video. Number two, art, so paintings, sculptures, and in the digital realm, now we're talking about NFTs. Wine has actually become a big alternative asset that people are investing in. Number four, numismatic coins and stamps. Number five, rare cars. And number six, sports cards, memorabilia, and comic books. And as you can tell by this list, alternative assets covers consumer goods that are basically rare and hard to replicate. Now, within this space, watches have yielded some of the most amazing returns over the last few years. But to be successful in it, and with any alternative asset investment, you really have to be an expert in minor details. But we're going to zoom out and start from the big picture first, and then drill down into the details. And the first point is that not all watches are an investment, or maybe I should say a good investment. This watch here is a Davis. I'll put it up to the camera so you can take a look at it. I really can't tell you anything about the brand. I bought this watch 15 years ago when I was in Amsterdam, when I was just kind of getting started in my adult life. I had a limited budget, and I thought at the time, that all mechanical watches go up in price as they get older. Sadly, of course, this is not the case, and it's something that you all should understand. And what I learned from this watch, this Davis watch, is that just like fine art, it is extremely important who makes the watch for these two reasons. Number one is reputation and desirability. The fact of the matter is that a brand comes along with a certain reputation as either, for example, being reliable or unreliable, of high quality or of low quality. And along with that reputation, especially when it comes to high quality watches, you're talking about a certain level of desirability that also comes along with that, as well as a level of prestige, which is very important for many people who are buying a luxury watch. Number two is, of course, stability and longevity. And why this is so important is because when somebody is buying a watch from a brand that they know, a brand that has been around for a long time, they know that this watch, should something go wrong with it down the line, can always be taken back to them and be serviced by that company, which is almost a kind of insurance for the watch that they've purchased. So now that we've established that brand is important, just because a brand is huge and well known, that doesn't exactly mean that their watches will appreciate in value. And the second thing that impacts the value of a watch over a long period of time is the scarcity of the watch. And how scarcity is determined is like this. It's a function of supply over demand, where the lower this number is, the more in demand a watch is. Therefore, the harder it is to get, thus making the watch more exclusive and more valuable. Case in point, Let's take two of the hottest dive watches from two of the largest brands, the Omega Seamaster 300 and the Rolex Submariner, with the date to, of course, compare apples to apples. Now, anyone who collects watches can agree that these are two amazing luxury pieces that are fantastically durable, they're accurate, and they can be worn in most situations. And in addition to that, they actually give the person who's wearing the watch a certain aura of accomplishment. But that doesn't mean that they are both good investments. So let's rewind and go back to the 2010s, let's say the early 2010s, when the Omega Seamaster and Rolex Submariner looked like this and cost a little less than they do right now at $4,400 for the Omega, and we're going to use the price of $6,000 for the Submariner, as list prices for this model in that period ranged from about $5,000 to $7,000. Now, at those prices, the Omega was at an index of about 73% to the Rolex, meaning the price of the Omega was 73% that of the price of the Rolex during this time. So, for either of these to really be considered an investment, I would have to see price appreciation at least in line with inflation. For this video, we are going to use my trusty inflation figures from my very first video and assume about 52% inflation since 2010 to today, even though the official number, which is manipulated, is about 30%. And just before I reveal what these watches sell for now, I do realize the Omega Seamaster with the non-wave dial is from 2011. So watch nerds, please don't crucify me. It's only a difference of 1 year between these two models. And here it is. This is what these two watches go for now. These examples are shown without sales tax. Both come with the original box and papers, which makes them more valuable. So if you buy a new watch, please, people, save the box and save the papers that you get from the dealer, because that actually makes it more valuable down the road. Additionally, they both come from the watch box, which is, in my opinion, the best dealer of secondhand watches in the entire business, and it is where I buy a lot of my watches. And no, this is not sponsored by them, but please remember, you have to buy the seller before you actually buy the watch, and the watch box is a reliable seller. Otherwise, if you're buying from people you don't know, you can really get burned in this business. So the first thing I want to bring your attention to is what these watches cost now, and you can see the current price of the Omega as offered by Watchbox is $3,654, and the Rolex Submariner is $12,452. That means where the Omega was originally 73% the price of the Rolex, it is now only 29%. Additionally, the Omega has gone down in value by 17%, or 45% inflation adjusted, since that $4,400 the watch cost back in 2010 or 2011 had the purchasing power of $6,688 in today's dollars. On the flip side, the Rolex has appreciated more than 100%, 108% to be exact. And the original $6,000 cost of the watch would only be worth $9,120 in today's dollars, meaning that even inflation adjusted, the Rolex has gone up in price by 37%. Now, coming back to the main point, even though both of these watches come from major and arguably prestigious brands, the fact that any Joe can walk into an Omega boutique and walk out with a Seamaster makes it fundamentally less scarce than a Rolex Submariner. So if you're thinking about a watch as an investment, please keep in mind that any watch you can easily get will likely not go up in price or value. And also remember this. In order to walk into a Rolex boutique and walk out with a Submariner on your wrist, you either have to have an established relationship with the boutique and its employees, which is fancy talk for you better have bought other watches from them in the past and hope that they remember you, or of course be extremely lucky, which I have heard of, but in my opinion it's simply not necessarily the best strategy, and it's really not very realistic. if that's your strategy to get a Rolex Submariner, especially not in 2022. So that brings me now to my third and final point, that you absolutely have to take into consideration when thinking about a watch as an investment. And I absolutely want to stress this to people because a lot of people get fooled by this, and it's fake scarcity. So what do I mean by fake scarcity? What I mean is that almost every week you will hear about a new limited edition watch in the world, okay? Limited editions celebrating amazing accomplishments like the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, which are actually amazing limited editions, or limited editions like this. Let me just hold this up to the camera for you. This is a Seiko 5 Sports made for Street Fighter fans like me. This is actually the Blanca edition. And although these watches can be fun and are called limited edition watches, they come with two main problems. So, number one on the list is that companies often make too many of these limited edition watches. In the example of the Blanca Street Fighter watch I've just shown you, 10,000 of these watches were made. And when you consider that they made one of these watches for each character in Street Fighter, you're talking about, 12 times 10,000? You're talking about 120,000 watches. That's not rare by my definition of the word. Even when you look at that Omega 50th anniversary edition of the moon landing, they made 6,969 of those watches. I would be skeptical personally with respect to the long-term value of that watch going up significantly simply because they made so many of them. And number two on the list is what they celebrate is sometimes, or even usually, too niche. And that means that when you're taking a look at how much demand for a particular watch there's going to be, if what they're celebrating is so niche that there are so few fans of that in the world, well, that might be a difficult selling it for more money at a later point in time. And those two issues mean that it's very rare for a watch like this, Blanca Street Fighter limited edition, which was both mass-produced and is actually targeted towards a real niche audience, to hit price levels like this Omega Speedmaster celebrating Snoopy and NASA's Silver Snoopy Awards, which sells today for about $50,000, despite the fact that I think they were first sold for around $5,000, $6,000. Again, it's all about knowing the market, what's hot and what's not. And if you don't know those things, then you're not going to do well investing in watches. And the same rule applies to vintage watches. A watch like this, which is a really great example of a vintage Omega DeVille from 1969, may seem like a great deal when you find one online, because the price of it will be relatively low to what you might expect it to be. I mean, how many great examples of this watch could exist more than 50 years later? But the truth is that actually very few of these watches in good condition can exist 50 years later. And what you'll often find online, especially when you're shopping around on eBay, is that a lot of the watches offered there will contain replacement parts, or they will have replacement dials, which from the collector's point of view means that the watch actually has little value, and long term the watch really won't go up in price. And to the greater point I'm trying to make here is that although a watch can absolutely be a great investment, again, you can't do it with just any watch. And often the watches that are really good investments are extremely difficult to get or only available at high premiums. They are definitely not available at good prices on eBay. You can't walk into any boutique and just walk out with one on your wrist. And when it comes to watches, especially watches, buyer beware. Be sure to buy the seller before you buy their watch. So, now, if you're still considering a watch as an investment, like I said, do your homework, learn the market. Not all Rolexes go up in value. Most do, but not all. And let me say that not all Omegas, like in the Seamaster example, go down in value. I mean, I've shown you the example of the Silver Snoopy, which also has gone up in value on the flip side of that. So, like with any alternative asset, You're only going to do well if you know what it is you're buying. Which brings me to my point on buying Rolex versus an Apple Watch. And let me start by saying that whatever it is you choose to buy, if it makes you happy, that's a really great thing, okay? As long as it's not a counterfeit, of course, because I abhor counterfeit watches. Please don't think of watches only in terms of being investment vehicles, because they don't have to be. A watch is something that you enjoy. It should bring you pleasure when you look down at your wrist, and it should give you a certain sense of accomplishment, especially if you're looking at purchasing a luxury watch. Again, I want to stress, do what makes you happy and always remember to get what you can afford. But on the topic of the Apple Watch, and here you can see this one has been chopped. The strap has been chopped here because my youngest son has been wearing it. This is a Series 1 Apple Watch that I got some time ago when they were pretty new. I paid about $400 for it. And I can say with all honesty that this is one of the most expensive watches I have ever purchased for one key reason. And that's because things like the Apple Watch are no different than a television or a telephone. It's a consumer electronic. It's not collectible. It's a guaranteed loser, much like holding cash in the bank, except the only difference is that the consumer electronics lose their value much quicker than cash does, even in 2022 when they've printed a bazillion dollars. So what I want to say is in the case of this watch, its value is probably today no more than $50. And that's the hard truth, meaning it's lost almost 90% of its value since I bought it. And I'd be surprised if I could even find somebody to pay $50 for this watch, considering that on eBay, somebody thinks it's worth $34, and that you can actually get these new and unworn for a little more than $100. On the flip side, I can take this Rolex Datejust, which was produced in the 1990s. It's my favorite watch. I bought it secondhand from the watch box, and I know that even today, I can get every penny out of this watch that I put into it. In fact, with full box and papers, you can sell this watch for probably around $5,500, $6,000 today. And this watch was originally sold back in the 90s for around $4,000. So, I mean, it's just because it's a Rolex Datejust. You have to know that this kind of watch really holds its value. So if somebody asks me, is a watch a good investment at the end of the day? Well, if you pay attention to brand, and you buy the right model, you might do very well for yourself. But like with any alternative asset, it's a very fickle game to play. And I personally wouldn't enter a watch purchase with the hope of making big bucks down the line. It's simply an unrealistic expectation. That said, if you're patient and find the right watch that suits you from a reputable brand, and a model that has longevity, a model like the Rolex Submariner, a model like the Datejust, a model like the Rolex Day-Date, well, you just might be buying yourself a luxury at little or no cost to yourself should you need to sell it somewhere down the road. And just know this, versus the Apple Watch, versus this watch, which is it's guaranteed to be worth zero only after about a decade. After 10 years, this thing will be worth zero. Nobody will want to buy it from you. You know which one, I think, is a better investment at the end of the day between these two, and it's definitely a mechanical watch from a prestigious brand. Now it's time for you to let me know what you think about watches as investments, or just watches in general. Do you like them? Do you think they're a waste of money? Do you think it's a good investment? Is there any other alternative asset you'd like to see me cover in a video? Let me know in the comments section, and don't forget to drop a like if you've liked this video. I'm very sorry that you've had to put up with a nasally voice. I am coming off a little bit of an illness, so I very much appreciate that you've made it with me this far. With that, I wish you all a great weekend. I wish you all health, definitely better health than I have. See you in the next one. Ciao.